thanks to JB Nagar, it's like a homecoming. I was a member of JB Nagar for a long, long time. Thanks, Seema Mehta, Narendra Jain, for your kind words of introductions. And thanks to Hemant Gandhi, uh, for inviting me, coordinating with me, and Manish Gedia also, who is also an active member and a council member. So with this, let us begin our journey of learning transfer pricing. So we have a long agenda today because the subject that was given to me was transfer pricing. Transfer pricing, it's an ocean, okay,
Yes.
and to select a few aspects of it would be again a difficult job. I don't know, which member would be interested or maybe dealing with which aspect of the subject. I got some feedback from the conveners as to which are the essential areas which I must cover, and therefore I have focused my presentation on those areas. Plus, for the sake of understanding, for the sake of completeness, we would be also going through some of other important aspects and developments. I've kept advanced pricing agreement last because that is not a day-to-day practice for many of us, especially SMP firms. So we would deal with that subject to availability of time. We'll start with the basics of the transfer pricing, the methods. I am sure that many of you would be well versed with them. We'll touch upon some of the finer aspects of those methods. We'll deal with the range concept, the safe harbor rules, and then straightway jump into the benchmarking, which is the core of the transfer pricing, especially this month of November, December. We are all engrossed into it, and then we'll also look at the documentation, uh, the penalties for non-compliance, and several other things as we go along. Friends, I have been would be referring to some case laws which are important. Uh, but it's you may be aware that it is not possible to cover the entire gamut of the subject, but as we go along we will definitely cover the important aspects of the subject. So let us make a beginning. The word transfer pricing refers to the determination of price of goods, services, intangible transaction between associated enterprise entities that belong to the same business group. So it is not you know something which uh, the actual transactions which has happened over a period of time. The transfer pricing has expanded in its scope, and the genesis of transfer pricing is way back in 60s or the early 70s in the United States, okay, which introduced the transfer pricing legislation. In India it started in the year 2001, and we have almost 2 decades of experience on transfer pricing. But believe me, the jurisprudence in India is far uh, you know more in numbers compared to the world, uh, uh, together, because we have a lot of case laws which are coming actively from the tribunals and the High Court decisions and some of the Supreme Court decisions as well. So OECD is the main body which came up with the transfer pricing guidelines. So that is a basis for the introduction of transfer pricing in almost all countries, and India is no exception to that. We have had a transfer pricing expert group set up, and which studied the OECD transfer pricing guidelines. Then there were presentations which were made before this transfer pricing expert group, and in their own wisdom they recommended the transfer pricing regulations in India. So OECD defines transfer pricing as prices at which an enterprise transfer physical goods and intangible property or provide services to associated enterprise. Much before transfer pricing was introduced in India, we have had similar regulations in Customs Act as well. Because any cross-border transactions under invoicing or over invoicing would impact the custom duties calculation, and therefore customs valuations are one of the very important basics of transfer pricing. But let me tell you, friends, that world over, custom valuations are not accepted for the purpose of the benchmarking. uh, it is an irony actually, because if you look, we look at the transfer pricing regulations, what it implies that contemporaneous documentation, arm's length benchmarking transaction wise. It doesn't say that you benchmark entity. Okay. And contemporaneousness of the uh, documentation or arm's length benchmarking of transaction is, very close when custom valuations are there, because there are experts who value the goods and service goods rather than more than services. But then there are issues in custom valuations as well, because there are fixed ad valorem duties. The custom rate is not dynamic, and there are many discounts, plus and minuses which are there in custom valuations, and therefore custom valuations world over. Of course, there are many attempts which have been made to make the custom valuation as the basis for the transfer pricing, but so far not accepted universally. It can provide a good guide in case of complex matters. So let's with this, let us go ahead. The checklist for the transfer pricing regulation. The why I have covered these slides, because this will be, I'll be sharing my entire presentation with you, and therefore it will serve as a ready reference for anybody who would like to practice on transfer pricing regulations. So first and foremost, is there an international transaction? Okay, if not, the law does not apply. Then whether two enterprises are associated with each other. Okay, with at least one of them is a non-resident. If yes, then we go further. Arm's length pricing. And mind you, here there is no threshold for applicability of transfer pricing. There is a threshold which says, not elaborate documentations are required if the turnover is not exceeding 15 crores. But that is not a threshold for not doing transfer pricing audit. Transfer pricing audit is applicable even with a 1 rupee of international transaction with an associated enterprise. And then there is a concept of arm's length. So what is arm's length? In the layman's term, arm's length is a market price. But it is easier said than done, because then there are various methods which are prescribed to arrive at the arm's length pricing. As we go along, we'll discuss those methods in little detail. If the pricing between two associated enterprises is not at arm's length, then whether the adjustments are made or price is otherwise justified. If it is at arm's length, no need for any adjustment. And if there are some adjustments which are required, then after those adjustments, we arrive at the arm's length pricing, and then go for the compliance of audit, documentation, etc. And if we fail to do so, then there is a penalty which would be levied. So this is in nutshell the overview or bird's eye view of transfer pricing regulations, how we make apply TPR regulations in practice. We have a section 92 which says any income arising from an international transaction shall be computed having regard to the arm's length price. Let me tell you, friends, that there is a domestic transfer pricing on specified domestic transactions, but we shall not be discussing this in today's discussion, because now it is the scope has been reduced considerably, and also it is applicable only in specified transactions where some deductions are claimed, ATI, etc. So for the sake of time, we would not be dealing with them, because it's a subject by itself. But in any case, very limited application. So what it explanation say, allowance for any expense or interest arising from international transaction shall also be determined having regard to the arm's length price. So it is not only income, but even an expense or interest, okay, needs to be benchmarked. The reason is that there is always a possibility of profit shifting. We have this concept, or the major project of BEPS, if you are aware, that is base erosion and profit shifting. This project was started by G20 nations about a decade ago. Okay, and OECD was entrusted with the task of coming out with the action plans. There were 15 action plans drawn up. Okay, and 15th action plan was a multilateral instrument whereby the existing double tax avoidance agreements would be modified through a superimposing tax treaty called MLI. And Now, many countries have signed MLI, and that is how, the existing double tax avoidance agreements are modified. But more than that, Action 8 to 10 of BEPS, that is base erosion and profit shifting, the prevention of base erosion and profit shifting, deals with the transfer pricing regulations. Because BEPS action plan had a three-pronged strategy of preventing BEPS. And what was that? That is, one is, uh, changing the preamble of the existing tax treaties, whereby providing that treaty shopping is not the objective. Double non-taxation should not be a result of the application of tax treaties. Secondly, was changes in the domestic tax laws to align domestic tax laws, in the line with the international best practices. And third, of course, was the MLI, through which, the existing tax treaties would be amended. Of this, in fact, there's one more aspect which was there about the digital taxation, which is the Action Plan 1, which is not yet, finalized. But Action Plan 8 to 10 deals with, uh, the valuation of hardcore intangibles, where there are DAPP functions, is there, which we'll see when we come to that. And of course, also there is Action Plan which deals with the country by country reporting, master files, and these are all part of the BEPS Action Plan. And India, being one of the very leader country in not only formulation of BEPS but also in implementation thereof. So just to give you an example, that BEPS Action Plan 1 deals with the digital economy, taxation of digital economy, and there is no consensus as of now. But the countries or the BEPS Action Plan gave, till the time we find a solution, countries can come with a temporary measures. They gave, temporary measures in terms of equalization levy. They said in terms of the, TDS payment, okay, and significant economic presence taxation. So India adopted all the three measures, and that's how, India is a leader in, in implementation of the, prevention of BEPS, in India. Next comes 92.3, which provides that transfer pricing provisions contained in section 92 shall not apply if the same has the effect of reducing the income chargeable to tax or increasing the loss of the assessee for under consideration. So it is a one-way street, okay, whereby if by applying arm's length price, if you find that, you have overcharged and declare more profits, then you can't go back and reduce your income or increase your losses. So the idea is that nobody should take advantage of transfer pricing regulations to reduce the income or increase the losses. Next is a associated enterprise. Now, the meaning of associated enterprise, as we understand, under the domestic tax law, is different from what transfer pricing regulations provide. Transfer pricing regulations, section 92 deals with the meaning of the associated enterprise. As you may be aware that there are two sections, section 1 and section 2. Section 1 deals with the participation in the management or control and management. It deals with the control and management aspects, whereas the other the part deals with the deemed transactions, where even though there is no control and management or limited control and management only to the extent of 26% of the voting power, if there are other ways whereby one entity can influence the other entity, then those transactions would be deemed to be an associated enterprise, or those two entities would be deemed to be an associated enterprise, and the transactions between them will be subject to transfer pricing regulations. So what it says that associated enterprises are those which are owned or controlled by the same or common entity or person. An enterprise which participates directly or indirectly, so any level of indirect participation, because it says through one or more intermediaries in the management of the company, control of the enterprise, or capital of the other enterprise. So management, control, and capital. Second, it says that if one or more persons participates directly or indirectly through one or more intermediaries in the management of the two enterprises, control of two different enterprises, capital of two different enterprises. It means the common parent and two subsidiaries. Okay. So when then transaction between those two subsidiaries would also be considered as a associated enterprise. Now let's look at the deemed A's. So first is a substantial voting power. I have not gone into the sub clauses because that they are only for the sake of our information. But all the clauses are covered here. Substantial voting power. First, it says that one enterprise holds 26% or more of the voting power, directly or indirectly, in the other enterprise. Then any person or enterprise holds 26% or more, directly or indirectly, in each of the two different enterprises. I gave an example. That there is a one parent and which holds 52% in one enterprise and say 62% in another enterprise. Okay, so both the subsidiaries, they would be considered as associated enterprise. Not only that, if the holding company holds 30% in one enterprise and 70% in another enterprise, or 26%, then also it is covered under the associated enterprise definition. Advancing of substantial sum of money. So one enterprise advances loan to the other enterprise of an amount equal to 51% or more of the book value of the total assets of the other enterprise. So total assets of the other enterprise, and if the loan amount is more than 51%, then those two enterprises also would be considered as associated enterprise. The idea behind is that nobody would give you a loan, more than 50% of your asset. So there has to be some underlying, relation, and therefore, it is given. Guarantee borrowings. One enterprise guarantees 10% or more of the borrowings of the other enterprise. Then two enterprises would be deemed to be an associated enterprise. Then appointment of majority of directors of the other enterprise. So one enterprise appoints more than 50% of the board of directors or members of the governing board of the other one, or even one or more executive directors or executive members of the governing board. Then both would be considered as a deemed associated enterprise. Similarly, appointment of majority directors of two different enterprises. So one is a direct, another is an indirect through a common parent. This is important. Dependence on intangibles with respect to which other enterprise has an exclusive right. So manufacture or processing of goods or articles. Business carried out by one enterprise is wholly 100% dependent on know-how, patent, copyrights, any data, documentation, drawing, specification relating to any patent, invention, model of which the other enterprise is the owner, or in respect of which the other enterprise has exclusive right. Now take an example which is very common in India about a contract manufacturing. Say I am a contract manufacturer, okay, and I manufacture, drugs only for one US pharmaceutical company, and that company has given, shared with me, the technology or know-how or the patent, of course, and that is under a secret, maintaining all the secrecy. But then I am, as a contract manufacturer with only one enterprise, 100% wholly dependent, I will become an associated enterprise of the foreign parent or foreign principal. So these are the way, even if there is no cross holding, even if there is a 0% holding, but since I am fully dependent on the foreign company for my manufacturing activity, I would become an associated enterprise. Similarly, dependence on raw material supplied by other enterprise, 90% or more raw materials and consumables are required for the manufacture or processing of goods or articles, or business carried out by one enterprise are supplied by the other enterprise, or by persons specified by the other enterprise, and where the prices and other conditions related to supply are influenced by such other enterprise. A classic example I give you. Let's suppose I'm a diamond manufacturer and I'm a site holder of the Diamond Trading Corporation (DTC), whereby I procure my 100% rough requirement from DTC only. Now, as we are all aware that the price of the rough diamonds would be dictated by the DTC. Can one say that I am in DTC or associated enterprise? Now technically yes, but practically it is impossible that DTC and I would be an associated enterprise. So this is one of the conditions which I find it very difficult. In case of it, or for that matter, forget about the DTC. Suppose I am supplying or procuring raw material from say one of the foreign government company. Okay, my 100% raw material comes from them, government owned or a semi-government company. Can I say that I in that government company are associated enterprise? Looks difficult. Dependence on sale. The goods or articles manufactured or processed by one enterprise are sold to other enterprise or to the person specified by the other enterprise. The prices and other conditions relating to thereto are influenced by such enterprise. Again, very difficult to prove in real life, but if it can be proved that if I manufacture whatever goods and services, and when I sell it to the other enterprise, and the prices are influenced by that enterprise, which is normally it happens in an international transaction, if it depends upon the bargaining power of each parties. Okay, if I'm in a buyer's market, then buyer will demand that okay, I would like to buy on these terms. If you can sell me, it's good. Otherwise, I will go to other seller. So it all depends on the market to market, but then this is a provision which is there. But it happens when we have a captive sale, for example, okay, or say when I am selling, I'm a subsidiary, okay, and whatever I manufacture, I have to sell it to my parent only, or I'm a captive manufacturing. So definitely these are the kinds of the situation which are targeted here. That in case of the captive manufacturers, price would be definitely dictated by the parent company, and therefore those kind of situations would be covered here. Controlled by common individual, very clear, where one enterprise is controlled by one individual and the other enterprise is also controlled by the same individual, okay, or his relatives, or jointly, individually with relatives. Now here there is a catch. Let's assume for a while, which is very common in the diamond industry, that there are two brothers. One brother is running an Indian company, other brother is running a company in Belgium. Both don't have any cross holding, okay, but because they are relative, they would be covered under this definition. Now it could be that suppose if those brothers are not on talking terms, so in those situations, even though they may be considered as associated enterprise, but in all likelihood, if they are not on talking terms, there may not be any transactions between them. Okay, so but these are the possibilities which are there. That even relatives, definition we need to go into the detail and then see if they are covered under the deemed associated enterprises. Controlled by HUF or member thereof. So where one enterprise is controlled by an HUF and the other enterprise is controlled by a member of such HUF or by relative of a member or jointly by such member and his relative. The next is an interest in a firm, AOPs or BOIs, where one enterprise is a firm, AOP or BOI, and the other enterprise holds 10% or more interest in that firm, HUF or BOI. So here, the cross holding is only 10% where there is a firm. One need to be very careful because normally we have the notion of 26% holding, but in case of a firm, it is lowered to 10%. And last is a residual clause, a mutual interest relation. There exists between two enterprises. Any relations of mutual interest as may be prescribed. Now, why this residual clause? Because it happened in the United States. that there was a situation where few companies came together and formed a cartel. Okay. Now, suppose for example this COVID vaccine would come. Okay, and if few companies make a cartel to sell those vaccines, and uh, if they transact in among themselves, definitely those kind of situations could be covered under this mutual interest relationship, and any transactions would be subjected to arm's length pricing. So, uh, definition of international transaction: a transaction between two or more associated enterprises of which either both or any one is a non-resident. So only when one party is a non-resident, the transaction would be covered under the transfer pricing regulations. Now, what are the nature of transactions? Purchase, sale, or lease of property, intangible property, provision for services, lending or borrowing of money. Now, so all financial transactions are covered. Earlier, they were not covered. Later, they were added to make it very clear and expand the scope. Any transactions having bearing on the profits, income, losses, or even assets. Mutual agreement or arrangement between two or more associated enterprise for the allocation or apportionment of any combination of any CC, that is cost contribution or cost contribution arrangement or expenses. So in case of multinational enterprises, it is very common, and we have a separate slides on cost contribution allocations. We'll see when we come to those slides. So these are the methods for arm's length pricing: CUP, resale price, cost plus method, profit split, TNMM, and any other method. Now let me tell you, friends, for the purpose of this presentation, we will be concentrating on the last two methods, which are very common in use. Okay, almost 90% or 80 to 90% transactions are benchmark even today based on TNMM in India, and largely so in other world also. And of course, now any other method, because financial transactions are prescribed, and therefore there are many transactions which are benchmarked using any other method. I'm sure members will be more interested in these two methods, and therefore we would be dealing with them in detail. Profit split method is generally used in case of benchmarking of intangibles. That's what hard to value intangibles, and where it is very difficult to find a comparable price. Okay, but using profit split method, you need to have a detailed accounts and details of financials of all the parties who are covered under debt transactions, and it is very difficult. Cost plus method are used generally for the cost centers, research centers, R&D activities, okay, and host of other activities we'll see. Resale price method, distributor, okay, where there is no further value additions, so resale price methods are used. And of course, CUP. Now, if you ask me, the true transfer pricing is through a CUP, that is comparable uncontrolled price method. But as you know, we have learned under the economics that these are the ideal situations. Now, in economics, if you remember, we used to start that other things remaining static, which never happens. Okay, and therefore the starting itself becomes a non-starter. Okay. Anyway, let's see these methods. So any method which we use, okay, arm's length for determining arm's length price, what we need to do first is the characteristic of the property of the services, whether it is tangible, it is intangible, it is services. First, we need to classify it. Then we need to also look at the FAR analysis: functions performed, assets used, and risks assumed. So any method which we used, these three are very, very common. Whether the functions are comparable, whether the assets used, because many times we have to make adjustments for the capacity utilization. Now, if one manufacturer is doing a triple shift, okay, and charging higher depreciation, and the other manufacturer is doing in the single shift. Can we compare the two? If one has a most sophisticated plant and machinery, and investment in plant and machinery is way high compared to an ordinary manufacturer who may not have those kind of machineries. So those assets employed also plays a significant role. If somebody is using patents or proprietary technology which is not available to others, can we compare the two? No. Then risk, very important aspect about the risk assumed. That Western countries would like to always emphasize on the risk part. They say that the risk goes with the capital, and therefore they give more attribution to the risk assumed. And because of that, they would like to have larger share of profit into the developed nations, because the capital flows from the developed to developing nation. Indian revenue authorities view is always that why you attribute risk to the entrepreneurship. There are many aspects which you need to see, and risk has to be borne or divided between the developing nation and the developed nations. So even in a captive manufacturing, for example, the domestic company does take a risk, maybe a limited risk, but then there is a risk. Okay. Also, there are risks whether suppose when the risk is attributed to the parent company, whether the parent company has an appetite to assume that risk. It is easier said, that parent company assumes the risk. Now there are cases where subsidiary is larger than in size and turnover than the parent company. Then the risk capacity of the subsidiary is far more than the parent. And if the subsidiary is located in the developing nation, can you say that the risk is assumed by the developed nation? So these are the various factors which one need to look into before we venture into the FAR analysis. So one also need to look at the contracts. So it starts with the contracts, but as we are now living in an era of substance over form, contracts or the terms of the contracts have limited applicability to the extent of finding the the profile of the companies or the role played by both the parties in the transaction, but actual conduct is of utmost importance. We may divide under a contract, okay, this party will do this party will do that, but in real life situation, who is doing what? And that is what counts. Economic circumstances, of course, market comparability. So a company operating in Indian market cannot be directly compared with the company operating in a European market, and therefore, market comparability is of utmost important. And we'll see when we come to the foreign tested party. This is one of the major roadblock when we go for the foreign tested parties. But sometimes we might have to go. But foreign comparables, definitely, that is cannot be done because of the different markets. Business strategies, market penetration. Many times multinationals come with a clear vision. First 10 years, no profit. Now, how do you benchmark? It means that for 10 years, they can afford, they have deep pockets, they can afford to incur losses. But whether Indian government can afford to forgo those revenue on the sales which is made from India, except of course indirect tax could be collected. But then this is what is something is now not acceptable. We have videos on the internet. If any one of you is interested, please go and watch the UK Parliamentary Committee grilling the CFOs and CEOs of the world, where Starbucks and Google and other companies, they did not declare enough profits in UK, and including Amazon. So if they were grilled by the authorities, then how can you not show any profit when all the transactions are being done in the United Kingdom? So these are the market strategies. Yes, but as a market strategy, initial years, little bit losses or those kind of things, one has to have a very elaborate, robust documentation to prove the market strategy. With that, we come to the methods proper, comparable uncontrolled price method cup. So as we are, no meaning application rule 10B of the Indian transfer pricing regulation, there are two kinds of cups, internal versus external. Internal cup is a more robust compared to the external cup. Let's look at with the help of an example. We'll just see an example in a minute. Before that, this method applies where there are similar transactions between unconnected parties. So what are the steps? Identify price in a comparable uncontrolled transaction. Adjust the price for the material differences in terms of contract, credit, transport. Adjusted price is arm's length price. Now, what are the difficulties? So there could be several differences in applying cup. Difference in source of the product. If I am sitting next to the coal mine, my procurement cost will be much cheaper than compared to a person who has to procure the coal from 500 kilometers away, isn't it? Secondly, if I procure a product directly from the manufacturer as compared to somebody procuring from a third layer or fourth layer distributor, definitely there will be a difference in the pricing. Difference in terms of sales, the terms, the warranties. Do I give a 1-year warranty or I give a 2-year warranty? Do I give a comprehensive warranty or I give a limited warranty? Do I give installation or do I give installation free? So there are various even the credit period for that matter. So there are different terms of sales. Difference in volume. If I buy 1 quantity versus I buy 1,000 quantity. Again, branding. If I buy Colombian coffee versus Brazilian coffee. So brand is a very complex animal, uh, somebody would give, any amount of money for the brand he likes, and somebody would just don't see that brand at all. So it's a perceived value. Okay? So brand also makes a lot of difference. And of course, CIB or CIF versus FOB, whether it includes insurance and freight or it is free on board. So before we venture into cup, we have to make adjustments in respect of all these items. Now, these are the two different types of cup. So there is a parent company in USA. It has an Indian subsidiary and it has an unrelated company. So that parent company sells mobile. So it sells to subsidiary also, it sells to unrelated party also. Very simple, very simple transaction which I have taken. If the parent company sells mobile to an Indian subsidiary at say 10,000 rupees, the same mobile, the same everything configuration, everything is same. If it is sold to the unrelated party as 12,000, then the arm's length price is 12,000 and ESCO will have to make adjustment of 2,000. Now this is internal cup. Easy to get the data, easy to compare. Branding is also everything, all the aspects are taken care of, except we may make a adjustment for the quantity discount, terms of the sale, means the credit period which we give, okay, etc., etc. Now, if we want to compare the Pico's mobile, which say XYZ is also dealing with it, but unrelated party ABC. But then both the companies' mobiles are different. Now, can we compare it? Ideally, yes, if both are selling mobiles, it is a very good comparison. Cup method is, as I said, that is the crux of the transfer pricing. That here is a transaction between XYZ and ABC, which is totally unrelated. That I compare with Pico and ESCO, but subject to comparability of the products or services. Services, it is although more difficult. I am talking about the products. So I will have to make all kinds of adjustments. Number one, Number two, why cup method fails? If you look at the cup method per se, it says you have to benchmark every transaction. Now, of course, we can aggregate the number of transactions. Then, even if I aggregate similar transactions, then I need to have a data for benchmarking. It means cup method works only at the gross profit margin level and not at the net profit margin level, which data is simply not available in the market. Okay. And therefore, cup method fails, especially outside, cup, external cup. Internal cup, I still have a data, but external cup, I doubt whether anybody would be able to use, except in case of, benchmarking of the guarantees or, other financial transactions, where again, we use cup of, banking interest rate or guarantee rates, etc., etc. But otherwise, cup is very rarely used method, because precisely for this reason, although ideally that is the underlying aim of the transfer pricing, that you have to compare uncontrolled transactions. Okay. Now again, when I'm comparing uncontrolled transactions, I need to remove any other related party. Suppose if XYZ and ABC are related, I can't compare it. Okay, so they have to be really uncompared, non-related parties. That takes us to the next method, resale price method, meaning application and rule 10b we'll see. So this method applies where item obtained from associated enterprise is resold to unrelated party. So normally it is used, when finished goods are transacted. Okay, I am a trader. Okay, I buy and I sell it to others. Okay, so not much value addition. Here we are not talking about I'm buying it for the purpose of branding, doing some value addition, and then selling it. That is different. Okay. So one has to identify the resale price at which the item is resold to unrelated party. So I go on and find out, okay, I have sold it this rate. At what rate my associated party has sold it to unrelated party. And then I derive my, arm's length pricing. So reduce the resale price by the normal GP margin on comparable uncontrolled transaction expenditure incurred, say custom duty, etc. Adjust the price of the functional and other differences materially affecting GP margin, and adjusted price is ALP. So here is an example. A Pico has sold goods to ESCO, and there is a transaction between, say, unrelated party ABC and XYZ. So either you compare the margins, okay, or say ESCO has sold goods to XYZ. Then again you see at what rate ESCO has sold goods to the XYZ, and whether these margins are comparable. So in resale price method, I would always look at the pricing of the next transaction. Okay, so if I sell it to ESCO, at what rate ESCO has sold to XYZ. Okay, and whether those margins are comparable, or even when ABC has sold to XYZ, and the margin of XYZ, is it comparable with ESCO? That also I can show. So there are two ways of benchmarking this transaction. If I look at the ESCO's margin, whether that margin is comparable with XYZ, which is selling it. If not, then I need to make an adjustment. Again, resale price method is not very, practically used. Okay. Again, for the availability of the data, people don't use resale price a lot. Next is a cost plus method. Let's look at the cost plus method. So this method is generally applied where semi-finished goods are sold to associated enterprise. The steps involved are identify direct and indirect cost of production, incurred for property transferred or services provided to AE. As I said, in case of a research and development, contract manufacturing, also people can use cost plus method. Determine normal GP mark to such cost by an unrelated party. Adjust the normal GP mark for the functional and other differences materially affecting the GP mark. and the total cost increased by adjusted markup is arm's length pricing. So, gross profit margin in the household appliance industry. These are the examples, as I said, in contract manufacturers, household appliance industries, research and development activity. These are the industries where cost plus method is widely used. Even in a case where there is a sort of a dedicated marketing services person, people may use cost plus method, okay, where at least some profit is shown in India. The advantage of cost plus method is that it won't be challenged much by the department, because here there is no chance of showing you losses. It means you are showing some profit. There has to be profit. Only uh, the dispute would be whether you are showing 10% cost plus or 20%. Other dispute could be whether you are showing the comprehensive cost all inclusive, or you are excluding some items from the cost calculation. So these are the potential areas of dispute in cost plus method. Say here a parent A company in USA, contract manufacturing subsidiary B, and ABC versus the XYZ unrelated party. Again here getting data could be an issue. If I have to benchmark cost plus method, of course I need to go into the reverse, not a profitability ratio but the cost ratios, okay, and then I go and find out whether my return on cost is comparable with say XYZ or say ABC. Parent company would compare with the ABC, or what I am paying as a contract manufacturing, okay, whether the XYZ is paying the same rate to ABC Limited. That takes us to the next method, the profit split method. As I said, again, a limited application in the real life, okay, but widely used for patents, intangibles, R&D. R&D, you can use profit split method or the cost plus. But let me tell you, friends, cost plus method is widely used even in case of R&D rather than the profit split method. This method is applied where there is transfer of unique intangibles or in multiple international transactions. So determine combined net profit of the associated enterprise. Arising out of international transaction. Evaluate the relative contribution of each enterprise to the earning of the combined net profit on the basis of FAR. So at every stage, we need to do the FAR analysis. So I'll give you an example. Say there is a US company. It has a manufacturing hub, say in Indonesia. Okay, the Indonesian company manufactures a good based on the technology which is provided from an Ireland company, because the patent is registered in Ireland. Okay. Now that Indonesian company has a distribution arm or distributor company in Singapore, and those goods are sold in India. Now you can imagine, US company, Indonesian manufacturing, Ireland patent holding, marketing arm in Singapore, and the consumer is in India. And this kind of a complex transaction, if one were to assign a profit, so at every stage I have to do the FAR analysis. US, still I can, have more complex. That financing is done by say Hong Kong. Okay. Now, these are the kind of situations in which there is no other alternative but to go for profit split method. So what we do here, evaluate the relative contribution of each enterprise to the earning of the combined net profit on the basis of FAR. Believe me, friends, it was not possible earlier to go for this method, but now with the filing which is recorded on CBCR, country by country reporting, now governments have a data of their entity level profitability. Okay. And therefore, going forward may be possible, or some companies may in their own enlightened interest would like to go for this kind of method, so that there is a clarity and at least they know that they would be taxed only on rupees 100 and not They would not pay 150 rupees tax on an income of 100 if it is left to the different jurisdictions. This method can also be used for the under a bilateral map or a multilateral map, whereby a company can benefit. Okay, but of course, company will have to disclose all its accounts and the strategies. Split the combined NP among the enterprise in proportion to the market returns and distribute profits in proportion to the relative contribution. So each enterprise, a Singapore enterprise has contributed to what? Marketing. Now what is attributable to that function? Ireland company has contributed what? Technology. What is the contribution to that? Okay. Hong Kong company has contributed what? Finance. Attribute profit to that. Who has assumed the risk? The US company has attribute some profit to the risk. And the manufacturer in Indonesia. And of course the market. So India would say, no. But if I would not have purchased it, how you would have earned money? So the larger contribution should come to the market. Now, that is where the disputes arise. And now from FAR, we have moved to farm. So what Indian government says that FAR is not sufficient. FAR is what it says, functions, assets and risk, but what about the market? And therefore, now we have moved from FAR to farm, and market also need to be considered. And that is where, we are coming, AMP expenses, the market intangibles. People are talking about the market intangibles. Market was never considered important, but now world has also recognized that yes, something needs to be attributed to the market, and Indian government says something not, largely it should be attributed to the market. So it is like this, that if you don't have a market, whom you will sell, and if you don't have production, from whom you will buy. So both are supplementary to each other. I think both needs a proper distribution. So ALP has to be determined on the basis of the profits apportioned. So as shown in this figure, US company has a manufacturing company B and a marketing company C. So every stage you go on comparing margin based on the FAR analysis, and then try to attribute the profit. Say I would say 20% to risk. I would say 15% to the technology in the Ireland company. Marketing, say 25%. Okay. Finance, normal rate of interest is 16% I would give. And then, balance I would distribute between the market and the manufacturing. Now when I distribute, say, even 20% to market, for example, then I again need to compare those 20% with the FAR analysis in India and see whether that is at arm's length. So friends, this is what profit split method is all about. And that takes us to the next very important, and we'll deal with it little detail because this is our day-to-day application. That is transactional net margin method, TNMM. Why this is important? Because the ready availability of data as compared to the other methods we have already seen. Even in the resale price method, it is difficult to get the margins compared. But in TNMM, perhaps because we have a database, we have STP, okay, Proves and various other databases which are available in the market, and we can, or if it is not there, we can download from the MCA website and then compare the margins. What are the steps involved? Compute net profit margin of the enterprise from international transaction with associated enterprise having regard to the cost incurred, sales effected, assets employed. Compute net profit margin realized by the enterprise or unrelated enterprise in a comparable uncontrolled transaction by applying the same base. Adjust NP margin realized or for differences affecting NP. As I said, we may have to make a difference for the working capital adjustment, for the capacity utilization, for the quantity discount, for anything. Even sometimes, recently we came across a case where we had to make an adjustment on account of foreign exchange difference because there was unusual gain. or unusual loss. Now we have to remove that and then compare the transactions. Then perhaps you can fit into the comparability. Adjusted net profit. Of course, compare NP margin related to cost, sales, asset of the AE with the NP margin controlled by the party in the comparable transaction. We not only compare at the operating level, we go for PBT, PBIT, PBIDT, at three different levels, and then we see whether at all levels it is comparable. Adjusted NP margin takes into account to arrive at the arm's length price. We'll see all this with the help of an example. So there is a company X, a parent company, say in France, and company Y subsidiary in India. Okay. Then a company P and company Q. X appoints company Y. It's only on subsidy for marketing, and Y charges company X fees based on 5% of its net cost. Okay. So whether this 5%, when I prepare a profit and loss account, whether this is comparable with what profitability company Q is showing. Okay. Assuming there is no relation between P and Q. Now, friends, Institute has published guidelines on transfer pricing regulations, and I would recommend all of you to go through that. So there are 3 to 4 basic documents for learning transfer pricing. One is the OECD guidelines. I've already told you. OECD transfer pricing guidelines are available. Download. You can download it if you want to purchase. BCS has published, subsidized version with a special permission from OECD. Otherwise, it is expensive book. You can also have a UN transfer pricing guidelines. Again, both you can download, but both are belonging to 2017 edition, and that is the latest one. Okay. Then we have ICAI guidelines, which is revised in 2020, August 2020. On transfer pricing guideline, it is there. Okay. So these are the 3, and of course the BEAR Act and provisions which are there on the transfer pricing regulations. So these are the things, sources of you're learning the subject further. So what are the issues which are coming up in application of TNMM? This is a part of the, and one of the example which I have taken from the ICAI guidelines. So barriers to industry in the entry in the industry, competitive position, management efficiency, individual business strategies, threat to substituted products, varying cost structures. On each item, you can go on speaking for half an hour, 1 hour, that how these factors would affect their margins. So it is not that TNMM, you just pick up the net profit and just apply it. One need to go into the detail. So transfer pricing, if you really look at it, it's not exact science. It is more of an art, okay, than a science. Means that 2 people doing transfer pricing analysis may come out with a different, or invariably would come out with a different opinion. But then whosoever, whatever does, that was justified. So difference in the working capital level, difference in the import versus domestic content, difference in the capacity utilization, difference in business model, outsourcing versus manufacturing in-house, okay, versus all process in-house, difference in functions, say undertaking on-market distribution channel versus distribution through individual distributors. So these are some of the examples. Likewise, there could be many examples. I gave you an example of foreign exchange rate difference. Okay. Payment terms, assets employed, risk assumed. These are also, the factors needs to be taken into account. This example is there. Say there is AE1 Limited. Okay, manufactures compact disc CD writers and sells the same to AE2 Limited, which is an AE of AE1. AE1 does not have a similar transaction with any other non-AE. No internal cup is available. As AE1 does not have information and data to identify comparable company, it has used the databases in public domain for carrying out the research. Now, let's look at this. So I specifically picked up this particular slide to show you how we do the benchmarking analysis. And mind you, every step what you do, you have to record it, document it, because under the Indian transfer pricing regulation, we have to select the most appropriate method. And how do we select after 5 or 6 methods? We have to eliminate the methods, and we have to justify why I have not used that particular method. Now within the method, suppose I have justified TNMM. Now within the TNMM, how I have selected the companies. So what I do, I have given the in order to find out the comparable company, I have given 3 keywords. Computer, I got 800 companies. Computer hardware, 250 companies. Computer peripherals, I got 66 companies. Now my elimination process starts. Then I say that companies with different activities. Okay, so I compare my activities. I find 800 companies. For example, suppose if I am a jewelry manufacturing company, okay, then I will first give the larger set. What I would say, diamond and manufacturing, precious stones, then jewelry. Then I will find out which companies are only in jewelry manufacturing. So I would remove all the diamond trading, diamond manufacturing. Okay, so likewise I need to go for the elimination. So first set gives me 800 companies. I remove 800 companies with different activities. Okay, because I'm into the CD. Companies with duplication with multiple databases are used 75. So I remove them. There are 90 companies for which financials are not available, though they are comparable, maybe. So I remove them. Companies having significant operations like sale or purchase with related party. Again, I can't compare a tendered transaction with a tendered transaction. Okay. So if I have to compare my related party transaction, I have to pick up the companies which have less than 20%. In some cases, even 10%, 20% is high, but okay. If the comparable company has a 50% transaction with the associated, I can't compare with them because that company's price is already influenced. Okay. Then companies having significant operations like sale or purchase with the related party. Again, 100 companies are removed. Companies reporting no operations, so they are the different companies sort of. I removed 50 companies. So after all this removal, I left with only one company which is comparable. So let's say Z Limited is comparable. There is also turnover. We do multiply by 10. Okay, 10 times minus or plus turnover wise, because then the size of the company in order to find whether it is comparable. Say here 130 crores, 200 crores, quite comparable. Okay, then I have other income 5, 10, total income, operating expenses, and likewise total expenditure, and I come to the profit of 58 and 24 and 58. Okay. So then I convert that into operating margin. So my total operating cost 100, 139, operating profit is 30. Okay. And here it is 61. So my operating margin before interest 52.94 and 66.67. So this is profit before interest and depreciation, PBITD. Okay. Then profit after depreciation, but before interest, PBIT, profit before interest and taxes, 36.84 and 51.52. So this is just a comparison. This is how I compare. I find that my profits are not comparable. Okay, but of course this is one company. I need to find out at least more than one company. Go for the arithmetic mean up to 6 companies. Beyond 6 companies, go for the range concept. We'll see both of them as we go along. But this is just an illustration. How do I do my benchmarking? Tested party. Now what is tested party? Tested party is the one whose profitability is analyzed and benchmarked for establishing arm's length price of the international transaction or a specified domestic transaction. It means that there are 2 parties. One is Indian party and foreign party. So whose profit I'm going to see? If A is transacted with B at arm's length, then even both of suppose if A sold goods to B at arm's length, then B has purchased goods from A on arm's length. Correct? That's the analogy. Now, so if I want to prove that A sold goods to B at arm's length, if I prove that B has purchased goods from A at arm's length, is it not proved indirectly? It is proved. So, do I need to benchmark B's transaction or A's transaction? That is what we are going to discuss. So, who should be the tested party? Whose profit I am going to benchmark? So, there are certain rules. The party which is least complex in terms of FAR analysis, functions performed, assets employed, and risk assumed. That party you need to select. So if there is a manufacturer and a distributor, so it means that a manufacturing company has an associated party which is in distribution. Now who is the least complex? Naturally, distributor, correct? Because manufacturer would have used some patent, some technologies, some assets, etc., etc. And therefore we choose distributor as a tested party. Not only that, reliable information about a tested party should be available. If I want to select distributor, but if the information is not available, then what? Thirdly, reliable information about the comparable is easily available and readily available and should be capable of being verified independently. So I have a distributor whose data is available. Okay, it is least complex, but I don't have a comparable. Then again, I can't use distributor as a tested party. Now, if that distributor happen to be a foreign party, can I take that party as a tested party? So between the Indian manufacturer and foreign distributor, can I take foreign distributor as a tested party? So there is no statutory permission or prohibition in Indian transfer pricing law. But when we look at the tribunals, they are divided. We have two case laws of Pune Tribunal, which are against SSC. That is Carraro India Private Limited, 124 IT 2019, and this Beckert Industries Private Limited, 347 IT 2019. Both says that the concept of foreign A is foreign to Indian transfer pricing regulation. It means there is no statutory backing, and therefore you cannot use foreign party as a tested party. But if we look at USA, EU, Malaysia expressly allowed foreign party as a tested party. If we look at the India chapter on the UN transfer pricing manual, United Nations has published a transfer pricing manual, as I said, in 2017, and there they have given country-wide positions, and I would strongly recommend each one of you to read that India chapter. That will give you the revenues bind, how they look at the transactions. And in that particular chapter, they have indirectly accepted that yes, there could be a situation where a foreign tested party is used for the benchmark. So they have not said no, because there is no prohibition as such. So if any of your client has already used it or you intend to use, there are case laws both sides and you can study them. While we are not going into the details of the case law, because transfer pricing case laws are case specific, fact specific. Okay. So therefore, each transaction or each party wise, we need to go into the detail. We need to distinguish if they are against, and we have to try to find the similarity if those case laws are in our favor. So revenue stand on comparatively adjustment. What is revenue stand? This again I picked up from that. I have given the source. It is there in the chapter. You can, in the slides you will get it. What it says: the onus to prove reasonably accurate comparability adjustment is on the taxpayer. Department accepts capacity utilization of working capital adjustments. Okay. However, Indian Transfer Pricing Administration finds it difficult to make risk adjustments in absence of any reliable, robust, and internationally agreed methodology to provide risk adjustment. I already discussed about the risk, when we were discussing FAR analysis. that how Indian department is not very comfortable as far as the risk adjustments are concerned. Then location saving arises. This is one aspect which Indian department, revenue department is harping, that they say that multinational enterprises make money out of location saving, and therefore the Indian entities should be additionally compensated for the location saving. And location saving arises due to cost advantages that jurisdiction provides. India provides various operational advantages like low cost labor, skilled employees, low raw material cost, low transaction cost, reasonably priced rental price space, lower training cost, infrastructure at low cost, and various direct and indirect tax incentives. So these are the location specific advantages which Indian Revenue Department would like multinational enterprise to compensate their Indian associated enterprises for the location specific advantages, highly skilled specialized knowledge workforce, access and proximity to large and growing market, large customer base with increased spending capacity, superior information network, distribution network, policy incentives, and market privilege. So that takes us to the other method. We have discussed TNMM at length. Now we come to the other method. Very important. This is our last method, which we would be discussing, and then we would be moving to some other important, of course, specific benchmarking and bench concept, arithmetic mean, etc. So CBDT has notified the other method by the notification 10 Rule 10 AB. Any method which takes into account the price which has been charged or paid, or would have been charged or paid for the same or similar uncontrolled transactions with or between non-associated enterprises under similar circumstances, considering all relevant facts. So it doesn't give much guidance. They say, okay, normally what a separate enterprise would have done, you also do it, considering all the circumstances. Even OECD guidelines permit use of any other method. Okay, provided those prices satisfy the arm's length pricing principle. So documents which are used for the benchmarking any other method, which are their third-party quotations or invoices, valuation reports, tender or bid documents, documents relating to negotiations, standard rate cards, commercial and economic business models, etc. So these are the common thing which we normally use: reimbursement of expenses, listing of reimbursement of expenses. First of all, even though reimbursement of expenses does not impact your profit or loss account, as an abundant precaution, I would recommend you to report it as an international transaction. Okay. So provide a ledger. You put a ledger copy in your record, back to back supporting, to show that reimbursement is on a cost to cost basis and there is no element of profit. And of course, contracts copy, because there are judgments, especially regarding the TDS on reimbursement of expenses. There are judgments in favor and against, but then the favorable judgment says that as long as there is a contractual obligation to reimburse expenses, and if there is no element of profit, then there is no need to deduct tax at source on reimbursement of expenses. And therefore, it is very much required that there is a contractual obligation and mentioned in the contract. Just to give you an illustration, you accept an audit assignment. Does your engagement letter say that this would be, the professional fees plus out-of-pocket expenses? Now, if it doesn't say out-of-pocket expenses, it means contractually the company is not obliged to spend on your out-of-pocket expenses or reimburse your expenses. But if engagement letter is very specific, then even if you incur expenses on, say, travel, and then subsequently claim as a reimbursement, then company would pay you as a reimbursement, and there is no need to deduct tax at source. This is a general understanding, and therefore it is very, very essential that we insist, that specific mention in the contract, even between two associated enterprises. Recovery of expenses, listing of recovery of expenses, ledger back-to-back supporting to show that recovery is on a cost to by cost basis. Then investment in share capital or even buyback of shares. Valuation report issued by the independent valuer, board resolution, filing of FCGPR, ODI forms to comply with the FEMA regulations, and the certificates, share certificates which are issued. So even in case of sale of registered patents, okay, maybe one can go for a valuation report, because if there are, I don't think you would have any comparable transactions for the sale of patents. And MP functions, of course, would be there. We'll see. But otherwise, one need to go for the valuation report. Has to have reimbursement of expense. We already discussed. Even the issue of CCDs. Now, under FEMA, it is permitted that you can issue a CCD. Means when the funds are coming into India. Okay. So it can be higher than the valuation report determined by the valuer. Of course, one need to take a valuation again on record. Interest on CCDs paid to AE less than interest rate, SBI prime lending rate prevailing in the market. Interest charged on AE more than interest LIBOR prevailing in the market. These are all, under FEMA also one need to comply with them. Indian company buybacks its equity shares issued to foreign AE at a value determined in the valuation report. Okay. Or it could be less than that. Under FEMA it is permitted as long as you pay lower amount than the valuation report when the money goes out. Okay. So these are the various transactions and the any other method which is used in the real life scenarios. So illustrative list of various methods. Commodity and oil. Normally, this is not the sacrosanct, but by and large, payment of interest cup. Commodities, why commodities and oil? Because they are traded on the exchanges. So suppose if I have to benchmark a bullion trading, so I have a minute-to-minute rate available on a bullion trading. Okay, and we did it. In fact, we did for the ingots. Okay, for the steel industry, and we benchmark based on the market rate which is available. Even oil exchange is available. Okay. Royalty, normal internal cup may be available. One has to try. Otherwise, TNM. Okay. Then distribution of goods, resale price method, provision of services, cost plus, contract manufacturing, TNMM. It could be either way of them. Okay. And profit split method, multiple transactions involving intangibles. Management charges, no specific method. Best test applicable, acceptable allocation. Sale of shares, intangibles, other method we have already discussed. Can rely on the valuation report under a third method. That takes us to very important concept of range concept. Range concept is applicable for international transaction undertaken on or after 1st April 2014, effective from the assessment year 2015-16. It is applied only where 6 or more companies are available. Then the range concept applies. Otherwise, arithmetic mean is to be used. So here is a diagrammatic representation. So whether a single price is arrived at, yes, then the price thus determined is arm's length. It appears in the cup method. Otherwise, generally don't we get it easily. If not, as per range, either range concept or by arithmetic mean. When we are using arithmetic mean, then there is further leeway which is given that the difference between the actual transaction price and arm's length price up to 3%, 1% in case of wholesale trading of actual transaction price, then such difference shall be ignored. As I said, arithmetic mean is to be applied where comparable companies available are less than 6. So what are the steps? First, arrange the values in the data set in ascending order. Ascending means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Then find actual transaction falls between the 35th percentile and 65th percentile. Means the median 30 values. Okay, the value of the transaction will be accepted to be the arm's length price. Where the transfer price does not fall within the range, then the median of the median, that is 50th percentile, shall be taken as the arm's length price. Let's look at the example. Now see, we have this database of 7 companies, 162, 158. These are haphazardly we have arranged. Actual transaction price is 150. Now what is the solution? First, arrange all in the ascending order. So 136, 45, 52, 54. Okay, 7. Now what is the 35th percentile? 7. That is a number. Okay, number of companies into 0.35, 2.45. 65th percentile, 4.55. Now you have to look at the next higher number. So if I am looking at 2.45, you look at the third number. 4.55 means fifth number. It means that my range is from 3 and 5. What is 3 and 5? 3 is 152, 5 is 158. And what is my arm's length price is 150. So it is falling beyond range. When it is falling beyond the range, what would be my arm's length price? Median. Median is what? So since it is not whole number, so median is 3.5. 3.5, that is 4. Next is 4. And therefore my arm's length price would be determined as 154 and not 150. Okay. So this is how we compute the range. Okay. Now, this is again a real life case. Say 6 comparable I have. Okay. And my company AB James Limited 3.49. And this again I arrange in the ascending order and then find the 35th percentile, third value, 65th percentile, fourth value. 3.44 to 3.50. Mine is 349, and therefore it will fall within the range and it is considered as a arm's length. Is that clear? Okay. Next is a multiple year data in benchmarking. So when can I use a multiple year data? Normally, if I am benchmarking for say 31st March 20, I would benchmark the data of comparable companies also for 20. But many a times the data for 20 are not available. In just live example, current year, many companies have not yet filed their return of income because the due date is extended to 31st December under Companies Act, and therefore I don't have a data, and therefore I can use the previous 2 years data, okay, subject to certain conditions. Now this is more suitable for RPM, CPM, TNMM, and not suitable for the other methods. Okay, transaction has to be entered into on or after 1/4/2014. So we cannot use the multiple year data for CCOP, PSM or other method. It can be used only for the RPM, CPM and TNMM. We widely use for TNMM where the data is not available. So what it says, the regulation says each comparable selected, the data of current year is to be considered. In case such data is not available at the time of furnishing the return of income, data pertaining to two preceding financial year may be used. So you can use today for 318, 319 for the purpose of benchmarking 320. But while doing so, if 320 data is available of that company, you have to use it, 320 data. Okay, you can use in addition to 320, 318, 19, but 320 data is also mandatory. Okay. Now it further says that in the event current year data becomes available during the course of assessment proceedings, then the assessing or TPO has a right, shall be used by the TPO for the purpose of analysis. And therefore, the report which we submit is not conclusive. No, in fact, that's why whatever we are actually we are not certifying. We are issuing an opinion report. If you ask me really, in transfer pricing, we don't certify anything because nobody can certify arm's length pricing. We can give an opinion whether it is on arm's length or not. We cannot certify that the pricing is at arm's length because it is my opinion, and that is based on the availability of data as of now. I may sign a report at 5 p.m. in the evening, and the company might upload at 8 p.m. in the night, and it may be available on the database after a couple of days. And therefore, it is very, very essential that we take a screenshot with the date and time of your comparability analysis. So when we use multiple year data, we use a weighted average. Okay. So here I have given an example: 0, 1, year 0, year 1, year 2. Total is 900. Net operating revenues 5,400. So my weighted average would be 16.7. This is how I would compare multiple year data. Just to give you a summary, multiple year data considered irrespective of the range applicability. It entails use of data for the year under consideration and data for up to 2 preceding financial years. Data for the current year, if available, is compulsorily to be considered unless not comparable on quantitative or qualitative reasons. At the time of assessment, data for the current year, if available, must be used. If such updated data for the current year cannot be used due to qualitative quantitative filters, then such comparable cannot be used irrespective of the fact that the data for the previous year remains to be comparable. A fresh comparable not appearing in the benchmarking set at the time of compliance can be used at the time of assessment. So that flexibility is given, and that is very good. Another important aspect of our presentation or learning today is safe harbor rules. Safe harbor means circumstances in which income tax authority shall accept our transfer price, okay, or income deemed to accrue or arise, under section 9, as the case may be, declared by the assessee. So if we go by these safe harbor provisions, then whatever we declare, of course, in the lines of the safe harbor regulations, that will be accepted as an arm's length price. No further litigation, no further disputes. So taxpayer opting for the safe harbor need to find 3C FA on or before the due date for furnishing return of income. This year it is extended up to 31st January 2021. So these are the various items: provision for software industries, software development, operating profit margin declared by the eligible SSC from the eligible international transaction into operating expenses incurred not less than, so it is 17% up to 100% crores. If you need to declare operating profit margin of minimum 17% up to your 100 crore turnover and 18% between 100 and 200 crores. It does not include any R&D services. For IT enabled services, 17% same and 18%. For KPO, knowledge process outsourcing, the value of the international transaction does not exceed 200 crores. So if it exceeds 200 crores, you cannot go for safe harbor. Okay. And what margin you have to declare? 24% if your employee cost is at least 60%. If 60% or more, then you need to disclose minimum 24%. If the employee cost is less, 40%, but not between 40 and 60%, then 21%, and does not exceed 40%, then 18%. Then advancing of intra-group loans. We'll not go into the details because this would be available with you. It all depends upon the CRISIL rating. So what CRISIL rating you have, okay, the 1 year marginal cost of the funds lending of the SBI, plus. So you have to look at the 1 year marginal cost of funds lending rate of SBI plus 1.75% if AAA to A, etc., etc. So these are the depending upon the rating which you have. This would be one need to disclose this much. Again, advancing of intra-group loans where the amount of loan is denominated in foreign currency. The earlier was in Indian rupees, and this is in foreign currency. So here now it is linked with the LIBOR. There it was linked with the SBI rate. It is 6 months LIBOR, okay, and plus 1.5%, 3%, 4.5%. So as your rating goes higher, you need to disclose less amount of interest. But if your rating is bad, lower, then you can pay a little higher interest. Guarantee, where the guarantee amount does not exceed 100 crores, okay, or exceed 100 crores, and rating of A is done by the agency registered with SEBI 1% on the amount guaranteed. Okay. Then provision for contract R&D services wholly or partly relating to software development. Then operating margin declared, not less than 24%. Again, here the cap is only up to 200 crores transaction. Okay, beyond 200 crores, you cannot opt for the safe harbor rules, and you have to go for the normal provisions. Provisions for contract R&D, general pharmaceutical drugs, same, not less than 24%. Where the value of the transactions. Then manufacture and exports of core auto components. Here it is eligible as international in relation to operating expenses incurred is not less than 12%. So operating profit upon operating expenses should be at least 12%. Non-core auto components, the ratio is 8.5%. Receipt of low value adding intra-group services, markup not exceeding 5%, does not exceed a sum of rupees 10 crores. Entire value of the international transaction, including a markup, not exceeding 5%. So when we come to now, let us come to some specific benchmarking. We have now crossed the safe harbor rules. So now we again come back to the general transaction and some specific transactions which were requested to me. We'll deal with them. In India, the transfer pricing approach for intergroup company loans and guarantees revolves around examination of the loan agreement. So financial transactions. So whenever you have to benchmark a financial transaction, what will you do? Loan agreement first and foremost. Comparison of the terms and conditions of the loan agreement. Determine the credit rating. We have already seen lender and the borrower. Identification of the comparable third-party loan agreements. Suitable adjustments to the comparable to enhance the comparability. Mind you, friends, wherever safe harbor rates are prescribed, for example, guaranteed transaction or a loan transactions, and if we don't opt for it, and our rates are substantially lower or not matching with the safe harbor, again we need to have a robust documentation and a sound justification, and that is where all these documents would be very, very helpful and required, because that officer is sitting with the mindset that this is the minimum what Indian government is expecting. If the assessee or taxpayer is declaring little lower than that, justify. Guarantees to an overseas subsidiary. Arm's length guarantee fee has to be determined. Indian tax authority would not be convinced if arm's length nature if the nil guarantee fees are charged. So naturally they say that because of the Indian party giving the guarantee, you are benefiting. So you have to have some compensation for that. Okay. Arm's length guarantee has to be determined. Okay. The simplest way to benchmark the guarantee fee is to follow the opportunity cost approach, known as an interest saving approach. I've given you an example here. Say if there is a XYZ PLC UK, okay, and that company is a subsidiary of ABC India Holding. Now, XYZ has borrowed funds from the Bank of England, for which ABC India has given a guarantee. Now, had the company borrowed directly, okay, it would have costed 4.5%. But because of the guarantee from ABC Limited, the borrowing cost is reduced to 3.5%, LIBOR plus. And therefore, there is a clear-cut saving of 1%. And therefore, the minimum guarantee, okay, or maximum guarantee fee the holding company, should charge is 1%. If holding company charges 1% and makes this good, then Indian officer would not mind. Of course, they can give some concession of 0.2% or something of that sort by justifying little lower cost for the benefit of the UK company to plow back to meet the immediate requirement, etc., etc. But this is what one need to look into it, that how much benefit that foreign company is getting by my guaranteeing the loan amount. So there are several possibilities to determine internal comparable loan if possible. Benchmarking prime lending rate of Indian banks, base rates of Indian banks, LIBOR plus X basis point, where X is determined by a benchmarking exercise, or UBOR plus X basis where determined benchmarking exercise, MIBOR or Mumbai interbank rate or LIBOR, etc., depending on where the transaction is carried out. So recently, various tribunals have been applying LIBOR plus as an indicator for the arms length price. There are plenty of judgments on the financial transactions, and we have the CBDT guidelines coming to the cost contribution agreement. 2017 we have already discussed, which defines CCA as a contractual arrangement among business enterprises to share the contributions and risk involved in the joint development, production, and obtaining of intangible, tangible assets or services with the understanding that the aforesaid are expected to create benefits to the individual business of each of the participants. So most common in R&D, development of IP, including IP use and ownership. For example, so there is a SAP, okay. Now that is to be implemented a company which has 10 subsidiaries worldwide. Now if the 10 subsidiaries go and negotiating the software, it would be expensive affair. But instead that parent company buys and installs that SAP at one place, and all the 10 subsidiaries are given an access and with the license, proper licensing. Therefore, what parent company would do, they allocate the cost, okay, to the 10 different subsidiaries. Likewise, there are management expenses. So each subsidiary is supposed to contribute to that cost of management. Nowadays, worldwide there is a concept of a corporate treasury. So if there is a large multinational enterprise with several businesses across the globe, and there are debtors and there are creditors from one company to other company. So rather than going to the bank settlement, they set up a treasury at one place and they do the internal set, because see, this is possible where there are no exchange laws. We can't even think of it because in India, exchange laws are very robust. But then there are countries where you need to transact actually money, and you can set off the receivables and payables. Now, even in India, for the product, buying and selling from the same party, you can set it off for the products. So if there is an internal treasury operations and the cost is shared by all the constituent entities, then how do you benchmark those kind of transactions? And that is where this CCA plays very important role. So we have a legal provision 92.2 where it says that where an international transaction or SDT, two or more associated enterprises enter into a mutual agreement or arrangement for the allocation or apportionment of the cost or any contribution to any cost or expense incurred or to be incurred in connection with the benefit, then service or facility provided or to be provided to any one or more such enterprises, the cost or expenses allocated, apportioned as the case may be, shall be determined having regard to the arm's length price of such benefit, service or facility. So we have to go into again a FAR analysis. Again, we have to find the cost benefit analysis and then distribute the cost, So we have to take recourse to this reporting requirement. We have to, when we go to master file, when we go to the local file, we find that important agreements related to intangibles, including CCS, we need to make part of it. And we have to go for the robust documentation even for the CCA. Then find out again it would be based on any other method where we need to go for the cost benefit analysis and then benchmark such kind of arrangement. It is difficult to find a comparable for the CCS. Next is a distributors agreement. Sibaji, how much time we have, because we are already 5:45.
Actually,
Yeah.
we have 5 to 10 minutes, and then 10 minutes, yeah, 5 minutes we can keep for the question and answer session.
Yeah. So I'm almost through my benchmarking. These are the uh, as far as the marketing intangibles are concerned, I would just like to, there are limited risk distributor, there are full-fledged distributors. Again, depending upon their functions and the risk, one has to do the benchmarking. Just to draw your attention on the AMP expense is very important. LG Electronics, where tribunal held that Indian taxpayer AMP expense incurred by the Indian taxpayer for creating, improving the marketing intangibles are permissible. In fact, there are other two decisions, Ray-Ban, Synoptics, and Canon also. One can go through it. Citations are given, but I would like to draw your attention to a bright line test concept. Which is something very unique. What is bright line test, which was developed in the context of the US regulation, a US code in DHL Inc. Case. What it says that it tried to divide between the routine and the non-routine. So if there is an Indian subsidiary, Indian company is spending heavily on marketing. Now that marketing, by spending heavily on the marketing by the Indian company, actually what Indian company is doing is creating a brand for the foreign company. We had a client which was, which helped, foreign jewelry company to come to India, and they spent heavily on that brand because that company was not known in India, and the Indian company was compensated for that. And that is, bright line test is that routine expenditure. Okay, to the what extent arm's length pricing or two arm's length companies would spend on the marketing excellence. That is a bright line. So if you cross the bright line, if you spend more than that bright line, then that is an excess which you have spent, and that would be not be allowed as an expenditure. So that is, the thing is that, so distributors agreement. So these are the slides I would skip. You can go through it. What risk, depending upon the functions one take, credit risk, inventory risk, etc., etc. Manufacturers, again, full-fledged manufacturer, whether licensed manufacturer, contract manufacturer, or toll manufacturer, what are the distinctions and how they distribute their risk. Okay, these are all analysis we need to do when we are benchmarking for the manufacturers. One important thing I would like to deal with is receivables, marketing receivables. Uh, you know, not marketing receivables, sorry, debtors. Okay, so whether debtors needs to be benchmarked separately. So because see, we have already benchmarked the underlying sales. Now, if the monies are not coming or monies have remain outstanding beyond the normal credit period, then we need to benchmark even for that. For example, if I have sold the goods for say 90 days credit, and if I have not received the amount for 180 days, then I am supposed to receive interest for the balance period. Okay? If I don't receive it, then there is an issue. So that is there is a case law of Bharti Airtel Services Limited, where the Delhi tribunal, uh, you know, dismissed the appeal of the taxpayer and said that no, debtors needs to be benchmarked. So one has to be very careful in raising invoices. If you provide that, the payment is to be made in during certain period of time. If you don't make a payment, then you have a problem. So ITIT concluded that the outstanding debtors beyond an agreed period are a separate international transaction of providing funds to each AE, for which the taxpayer must have been compensated in the form of interest at the LIBOR plus 300 basis point. This is Bharti Airtel. Okay, but one need to go into the details. Again, as I said, it's a fact specific. You might have some different considerations for allowing parties to pay late. All that needs to be look into the detail. In the documentation and penalties, just to draw your attention, robust documentation, Rule 10, it is said, we say in our office, any work not documented is not done. Okay. Regarding just AMP, before I just come, AMP expense, I would like to just draw your attention to one case law of Maruti Suzuki, Delhi High Court, because this is one High Court decision. Okay, and where it was held that the expenses in the nature of AMP were in excess of the normal expenditure because Maruti spent a lot of money in promoting the brand Suzuki in India. So I thought I will just it is a 2010 decision. So documentation very important because heavy penalties are there. We already discussed about the documentation when we were discussing about the other. Just a couple of things. I'll just take a few minutes, Shivaji,
Yes, yes.
uh, for the sake of completeness. Okay. So need for documentation, self-review of intercompany, penalty protection, basis for selecting method. We have to, as I said, I have to justify which method I am selecting, why I am negating other methods, and to be prepared for the transfer pricing order. Now, this is a typical steps in making a study report. We prepare a transfer pricing study report, and that forms the crucial part of the documentation. We start with the executive summary. We give the group review. We do the industry analysis. Let me share with you in one of our clients' case, when we did the industry analysis, we presented the benchmarking and where do they stand. The managing director was shocked. He said, even I have not looked my company from this perspective. And today I know that where do I stand vis-a-vis my competitors, vis-a-vis the industry. And he was very happy about it. So if we want to do a justice, we have to step into the shoes of our clients. We have to understand the industry. We have to understand the client's business in detail, understand the environment in which they operate, and what is the future also. Okay, so we have to go through for example, the concerned Chamber of Commerce reports or any other studies, research, etc. So if you are doing the diamond jewelry industry, you have to go to GM and Jewelry website, find out the reports, find out the industry overlook, find out the world overview, what is likely to happen. More so now, pandemic, what are the implications that would be having on the businesses. Then we do the functional analysis, PAR analysis we do, okay, economic analysis we do, and the conclusion. So that is how we prepare this documentation of the transfer pricing study report. And these are the, various form, etc. There. Master file, just to say that master file, I'll just take this one slide, which says that part A, everybody has to file of the master file. Part B, which is more in detail. So if intangible property exceeds 10 crore or other transaction exceeds 50 crores and consolidated group revenue exceeds rupees 500 crores, then only you need to file this part B. Others are the audit report, we are already aware. Okay. And then country by country reporting, if these are the due dates, we are already aware. Penalties, country by country reporting, which is applicable, where we have to go into the details. But this is very, very, selectively it is applicable. Secondary adjustment will not go into the detail. It is only when apply when I have accepted my transfer pricing adjustment. Now suppose if I have accepted that my interest rate should be not 3% but 5%. Okay, so I made an addition in my computation. Okay, but I have not made any adjustment in my books. Now secondary adjustment says that I need to make adjustment in my books and bring back the 2% additional which I am supposed to charge, bring that money into India. And if I don't bring, then again on that interest will be payable. So it will be considered as a deemed loan to the associated enterprise. So this is a background which has given. Okay. So these are the circumstances in which secondary adjustment would be triggered, suo motu by the assessee or by the assessing officer. Okay, again, APA, safe harbor rule, etc. So what is excess money? ALP is in primary adjustment and actual value of the international transactions. So these are the APA. We will not take it. We'll skip further because that is, as I said, not very, very relevant for the day-to-day practice. So with this, I thank profusely to all of you for the wonderful opportunity, and thank you, Sivaji. Thank you, Krishna. I think your other convener, and thank you, everybody.
Yes, just a couple of questions we will take,
Sure.
and then we will end the session. There is one. I think whichever questions I have sent, you covered. Just two questions. In case of software development company, which is developing software for its foreign parent company and charging on cost plus basis, which method should be used for ALP? And that is as per this also done.
Analysis as per TMI is doing and comparison of the same is doing as per. So, see, if safe harbor, if your margins are falling in the safe harbor, I would definitely advise to go for safe harbor. Okay. And if it is not, then you can, if you are doing cost plus basis. So again, you have to see within software also we need to also go through what are the prescribed rate by the say authority, software governing authority or whichever is there. So if it is there available, because these rates are available in public domain, and if you can benchmark nothing like it, otherwise you can go for TNMM also.
Okay. And second is whether it is advisable to go for safe harbor application or declaring the margin as per safe harbor margin is okay.
Absolutely, because see, if you don't want to go for litigation has its own cost. Okay, and only thing is that because see what happens that many times what happens that to buy peace we don't argue further and we accept some adjustment in our transfer pricing documentation or transfer pricing assessment. But again, we have to look at the secondary adjustment.
Yes.
We should not be caught there. So if it is within the threshold, I think there the limit is 1 crore. If we are within the threshold, then no issues.
Okay. But
otherwise, safe harbor is safe.
But the company is declaring the margin as per safe harbor only.
Then there is no need.
Then again, we have to go for the application for that safe harbor and that.
Of course, you have to file a that it is there in the documentation. I have given that you have to file a form opting for the safe harbor.
Okay, but otherwise also companies doing that same margin, declaring the margin the same as
no issues. No, but you have to opt for it. Safe harbor.
Okay, you have to opt for it. Okay.
If you want to get covered by it, otherwise you can suppose normally without safe harbor if you have declared it as per the normal TNMM etc. Okay. Then I don't think so there would be any litigation.